So please put your hands together and welcome to the stage Andrew Nesling.
Thank you very much. Lovely, thanks very much. So what I'm going to be talking about today is prioritising comfy seats, but not the engine. And that's things that product owners need to know about software engineering. So hopefully, if you're a product owner or a product manager like I am, this will be useful to you. This is sort of what I've learned on my journey from the teams I've worked with. If you're a software engineer, let me know at the end if this is the things you'd like product owners to know, or you want to know something different. So first of all, my journey. So the reason I used cars here is I've had a lot of old cars. I spent a long time on the side of motorways, broken down, waiting for somebody to come and rescue me, wishing that I'd spent more time actually understanding what was going on under the bonnet and investing in that, rather than the visible things I could see that were wrong with the car. So I've had quite a varied product experience. So currently I'm the product manager for robotics and intelligent machines at Dyson. Prior to that, I was the product manager for our back-end cloud services that support all of our connected products. Even before Dyson, I've worked from large, well-established companies through to very small startups. So quite varied. But actually what I found is that in all my roles, there were some common themes. There were some things that I found that knowing a bit more about certain elements of software engineering and how teams work, it actually helped me be more effective. And I think the parallel here really comes back to what Jeff talked about in the keynote, which is we're in a world now where we have to be able to change quickly. And then if we don't understand what's stopping our software from being able to change quickly, then we can't react. And that's why I found I needed to care about this stuff, because unless I understood what was holding us back from being able to change quickly, we couldn't react. So I'm going to start with technical debt. It's normally one of the things that you don't like to hear as a product owner or product manager. We've got lots of technical debt, no, we can't do this. It'll be too slow. So start off with, so spotting technical debt. What is technical debt? Now, to me, technical debt is the fact that your product design no longer meets the needs that you need to for your customers. So your product no longer is able to do what your customers need it to do, but also it's actually quite hard to change it to meet those needs. So that really is what I consider to be technical debt. So in this case, you've got a car, you've maybe moved house and now all of a sudden you're on a road where there's a speed bump and every single day you're going over and it's scraping and scraping and scraping. So how do you spot technical debt? Well, I mean, the easiest way to spot technical debt is speak to your teams. I mean, literally speak to your teams about what's holding us back, what's painful, what are you finding is painful every day that we're trying to make changes. But there's some other things that you can look at as well. So one of the things is, as you're making changes, are things unexpectedly breaking? So as you're making changes to adapt to your changing customer needs, when you make those changes, are things breaking that you would never expected to have been broken? But also then, it's about, hang on. Simple changes. But the other thing is, then, it's about changes that are hard. So it's about, I want to make this change, and I think it should be a simple change. It should be a simple change to do, but actually it's really, really hard to do. And those are the things that sort of give you an idea about, actually, there's something is holding us back here. So given that technical debt is not good, because it means it's slow, it means it makes you slow to be able to react, why would you ever want to take it on in the first place? Now, quite often you can take on technical debt and you don't realise. You're taking it on and you don't realise because you're not aware of how your product is going to need to evolve in the future. And so when you're taking it on, it's just not, it's not technical at the point you take it on. It's only when actually your product needs to change that you realise. But also sometimes, if you're not sure what the product is you need to build, maybe the right thing to do is to build something really quick. And just find out, so if you're experimenting, if you want to build something really, really quick and understand, is this the product, is this the solution to our customer's problem or not? If you build it quickly, if you find it is a solution to your customer's problem, or maybe you build a little bit like, oh yeah, this is definitely going in the right direction, great, okay, I can build on this. But then if it's not, if you build it and find, well actually no, this just didn't solve the problem at all, then you can just literally throw it away. So I think what I found is the time to take on technical debt is when you're not quite sure what it is that you need to build. So if you build something quickly, understand, is it the thing that I need to, that's going to solve the problem? And then I can invest in making it easy to change, making it easy actually to adapt to the needs that, because definitely this thing is starting to solve a problem. So looking at, so spotting technical debt. So this is the very first robotic vacuum that we made at Dyson, the Dyson 360i. This was the second robot vacuum we made, which was the 360 Hurist. And then this is the most recent robot vacuum we've made, which launched literally a month ago. Now, what sort of technical debt do you think we might have had as we were developing the first two that became quite problematic when we were actually trying to release the third one? Just hands up, anybody can think of? Yeah.
Shapes.
Absolutely, it's the shape. So when we were developing the first two, it was round, which is great. And actually, a round thing is quite good at not getting stuck in places. It's quite hard to get a round thing stuck when you're driving around your home. But then, as we were working on the new VisNav, we actually had a fair amount of technical debt, all but unbeknown to us when we were developing the first two, that we had to deal with when we were developing the third one. Because all of a sudden there were quite a lot of parts of our system that had been built on the understanding that our product was round. And there was a lot of things that we then had to do to start unpicking that and change that to allow for the fact that actually it's no longer round. So, paying off technical debt. So why should you care about it? Well, certainly, I mean, this is the thing to me, actually, as a product manager and previous as product owners as well, that I've found I worry most about, actually, because it's the technical debt that means that we're not able to react quickly. So that's the thing that I know that we've got wonderful teams who are able to, given a particular problem, talking to customers, understanding what their needs are, okay, we can build something for you. But if you can't react, then it's really, really hard. So the reason that I found I had to care about technical debt was that if I didn't, it meant I couldn't react. It meant that we couldn't react as a company and build the products that our customers needed. So when should you pay it off? Well, basically, as soon as possible, because like any other debt, if you don't pay it off, it accumulates. So if you've got some technical debt and you're building on it, so let's say your product is round and you build lots and lots of other things on top of it being round, and then all of a sudden it's not round, there's a lot that you're going to have to unpick. There's a lot you're going to have to rewrite. So at the point that you realise actually that we've got some debt here, we need to start paying it off, because if we don't, then we're going to keep incurring interest. If you build more and more features on top of that, there's more and more and more that you're going to have to rewrite. So how should you go about paying it off? And this is hard, because almost certainly the time that you invest in paying off technical debt, there'll be no immediate visible impact. Actually paying off technical debt, what you're doing is investing in being able to make changes into the future, but it's going to give you no return immediately. And so sometimes what we will do is we'll say, well, actually, we just have to. Because we know how we're going to need to change, unless we invest some time now in actually addressing this, we won't be able to make the changes. Sometimes we say, well, actually, in order to make this change, we know we could do it quickly, we could make this change quickly, it would incur more technical debt and it would then be harder to change in the future. And sometimes that's the right thing. If we're experimenting, maybe that's the right thing to do. But if we're not experimenting, if we understand what it is that we need to build, then we will say, well, actually, we will build this, but we'll address some of the technical debt at the same time. So takes longer than it would if we just did the quickest thing that could possibly do. But ultimately, it's going to mean that actually then the next month I can do something else, and the next month I can do something else. So, how much to pay off? It's very related actually, and actually this will link onto the next one when we talk about should you rebuild something or should you refactor it? So, rebuild or refactor. So what are the problems with rebuilding? So the first problem that you generally find with if you say, well, actually, this just doesn't, the design of our product just doesn't meet the needs anymore, and actually we're just going to have to start again. It's going to be too hard to actually take what we've got and knock it into the right shape for the needs that we've got now. So actually, we're just going to have to start again. Now, unless you've got excellent automated test coverage that tells you and tests exactly how your existing product is working, when you rebuild it, almost certainly you're not going to include all the things that the previous product did. So that's the first problem with rebuilding. Now, if you have got great automated test coverage, really excellent automated test coverage, you may well find it's actually more straightforward to refactor anyway. So generally speaking, if you haven't got brilliant automated test coverage, it's probably going to be quite hard to rebuild it and not introduce new problems. So the other problem with rebuilding is that so as you're rebuilding, you know that actually there's a lot of problems that we need to address in rebuilding this. And as you're rebuilding it, you make sure you don't make those mistakes. But almost certainly, actually, you'll probably just make some new mistakes as well. So there's no guarantee that if you rebuild something, you end up with something that actually is an awful lot better than what you started with. Now, I'm not saying this is always the case by any means, but these are just some of the challenges associated with rebuilding. And the other problem is it's slow. So actually, in order to just rip it up and start again, you could spend a long, long time getting to the point where your product, all it does is what it did maybe 12 months ago. And you've just invested 12 months and you actually haven't moved any further forward at all. So those are some of the challenges with rebuilding. So if we say, okay, well, let's not rebuild. Actually, let's try and take what we've got and just knock it into the right sort of shape. So what are the challenges with that? So one of the limitations, I guess, with refactoring is it limits the scope of the change that you can make. So, for example, with the moving from the round robot vacuum to the D-shaped one, we found that there were just some things that, whilst we could refactor what we'd got and actually knock it into the shape that would work for something that was a completely different shape, we're actually using completely different hardware, completely different sensors, etc., etc. It was actually just going to be harder. It was actually going to take longer to take what we'd got and slowly knock it into shape. So for some of the things, we decided actually it's going to be far quicker just to start again. It's going to be far quicker to start again. But the important thing, and the thing that I think sometimes is lost, is it's not one or the other. You don't have to choose to just rip everything up and start again, or actually just incrementally make lots and lots of small changes. You can do a bit of both, actually. And that's certainly what we did in moving from the round robot to the D-shaped robot. Because it was brand new hardware, it was a completely different shape. Every single motor was new. All the sensors were new. There was loads and loads of stuff that was new. Because like, right, actually the platform, we're just going to have to start again. But actually, there was a lot of stuff that how the robot navigates around the room, how it maps the room, how it understands where it is. All of those things actually were quite common. And we're like, you know what? Probably for those things, we can change those things to adapt them to a new shape. But actually, there's some things we're just going to have to rebuild. We're just going to have to start again. So, next one then, software architecture. So, what I found as a product owner that I needed to know about software architecture was fundamentally three things. It was, what is the responsibility of the thing that we're building? What are the interfaces between this thing that we're building and the other things that it has to interact with? And how are we going to evolve it? How does it need to change? And I found that if I understood those things and if I had those conversations with our engineering team, actually, we ended up building a better product by both me understanding the limitations of, well, what is the responsibility of this? How is the responsibility of this thing needs to be different from this thing? How are those things going to interface? And actually, because we were having the conversation and I was bringing to that conversation, I guess, information about how it might need to evolve. So bringing input in from, well, this is actually how we think our customers are going to need to change, how their needs are likely to change over the coming months and years. Bringing that into how we decide to architect something actually helped a lot. So from a responsibilities point of view, so let's say that you were the product owner for part of a car, so you were a product owner for the team that was responsible for the wheels. So what are your responsibilities? So one of your responsibilities is you've got to take some form of torque from the wheel hub and you've got to get it actually onto the road. So you've got to transfer that torque from the wheel to the road. You've got some responsibility for absorbing some shock. Now, actually, your responsibility isn't to absorb all the shock, and actually that's an interesting thing, because actually that's another team's responsibility to absorb large shocks, but actually you've got a responsibility to absorb a bit of shock. And also you've got a responsibility for actually longevity. So the wheel can't fall apart after a couple of 100 miles. So those are some of your responsibilities. So in terms of your interface, what's your interface? Well, I've got mechanical coupling. We've got to be able to transfer a certain amount of force through that mechanical coupling. And also there's a space envelope that we've got to work with inside. So knowing those things, so as a product owner for a team who's got responsibility for developing wheels, if I know what the responsibilities of the wheel are, and I know how it's interfacing to the other parts of the car, actually, I've got quite a bit of freedom now. So actually, with the team who's trying to make wheels as good as they can possibly be, actually we can evolve quite a lot. We can try changing, providing we stay within the space envelope, we can try different wheel sizes, we can try different tyre sizes, we can try different tyre compounds. There's a lot that we can do, actually, to evolve and make the best wheel that we can, but yet it still interfaces with the rest of the system. And this is one of the things that we found. So in moving to this new product, because we were rebuilding the entire platform, so literally all of the electronics had changed, all the mechanics had changed. It took us quite a long time to get to a point where we could actually get the robot to literally just move around a 1 by 1 meter square. It took us months and months and months to get to the point where actually we could just get this thing to move. But interestingly, when we got to that point of actually being able to get this new thing to move, and obviously the bit that took the time was the bit that we rebuilt. It was the bit that we had to rebuild from scratch. But when we got to that point, actually we found within a couple of weeks, it was running around, it was cleaning homes, we were able to map and all this sort of stuff. And that was by thinking about the different responsibilities of different parts of our system and how they would need to evolve. And that was that really brought home to me the idea of actually, because we'd been having those conversations about what the responsibilities of different parts of our system, how they're going to need to evolve, meant that we were able to do things that just wouldn't have been possible otherwise. So continuous delivery is next. And continuous delivery may sound a bit like this, but actually, if you are doing continuous delivery well, then there's a subtle difference to this. So whilst you are changing the wheels on the car whilst it's moving, what you want to be able to do is change the wheels on the car whilst it's moving, but doing it safely. So what does continuous delivery mean? So for me, continuous delivery is the ability to continuously change your product, but do it safely. So it's basically how can we get to a place where we can continuously be changing the product in a way that is safe. So I mean, it can feel quite risky to be continuously changing your product. It's like, well, if I'm continually putting changes out, isn't there lots and lots of opportunities for it to be broken for our customers? But actually, it does also feel pretty risky if, rather than actually maybe putting 10 changes out in a go, possibly even 1 change out in a go, if we say weren't releasing every week, every 2 weeks, and we were saying actually we're going to group them up and we're going to release every 6 months, the number of changes that you've got in that release that you're putting out every 6 months is massive. You've got like 1,000 or more changes. And the chances of having a problem when you've got 1,000 changes is pretty high. So actually, that's pretty risky. So what we've found is that actually, if we invest in being able to make changes frequently, but do it safely, it actually reduces the risk rather than increases the risk. And from a product perspective, how does it help? Well, it's absolutely wonderful as a product owner to be able to get changes out continuously, to actually be able to put little things out. Does that answer the question? Does it not? So actually having the ability to continuously be able to put small changes out there and actually make sure that you're heading in the right direction is brilliant. But the flip side of this is, so the fact that you're putting changes out, the fact that you're continually putting changes out, doesn't mean that they all need to, that your customer needs to see them all. So you can put changes out, you can put them behind a feature toggle, so maybe you just toggle it on for just a few of your users. So the changes are in there, maybe just a few of your users see it. You can learn from those. Maybe you put it on and it's effectively enabled for everybody, but nobody sees it. So you can understand, you can get metrics for how is this new thing working? Does this look like where we make it visible to people, it would be doing what we want? So there's a lot of opportunities to, although you're putting everything in and continually trying to get changes in and actually deploying them into production, you don't have to make them all visible to your customer. But sometimes actually there are advantages to doing that. I'll get onto that in a second. The thing is though, to go to continuous delivery, it's not free. Actually, so in order to be able to make lots of changes safely, you have to invest a lot. You have to invest a lot in automated testing. So automated testing is primarily the thing that's going to allow you to make lots of changes safely. But also you need to invest in a fair bit in instrumentation in terms of understanding when I put this change out, how will I know it's working properly? But what we've found is that by investing a lot in this, we get so much more back. But you do have to invest. So if you're just making changes very frequently, but you're not investing in lots of automated testing, you're not investing in instrumentation, you're not investing in deployment pipelines, all of this good stuff, then you're going to be making lots of changes, but you're not doing it safely, and lots of things are going to break. So continuous delivery. So one of the things that we knew as we, at the point that we launched our last round robot vacuum, it didn't have the ability to be able to go and clean a specific room. You couldn't say, well, you couldn't sort of segment your house into a series of rooms and say, well, go and clean that room, but actually don't clean that area over there. So at the point that we launched it, it couldn't do that. Now we knew at the point that we launched our round robot vacuum, we were already starting to work on the D-shaped one. And we knew that absolutely when we brought the D-shaped one to market, we needed that capability. Our customers were telling us we want to have the ability to be able to actually send the robot just to go and clean the kitchen, for example. Now, what we could have done is said, okay, well, let's just build this capability into the new one. Let's build the capability of being able to segment the house into the new one. And at the point we launch that, then it'll have that capability. But actually, we took a slightly different approach. And we said, well, actually, there's a lot of learning that we could get if we put this new capability into our round one. So that capability wasn't there. We hadn't sold it on the basis that it had that capability. But we thought, well, actually, if we build in the capability of the round one, we can put it in front of people, we can learn. And that's exactly what we did. So we put it, so we bit by bit improved the ability for our round robot vacuum to be able to go and clean specific parts of the home. We learned from customers what was working, what was not. We refined it and refined that. And that meant that at the point that we launched the D-shaped one, it just worked perfectly. In fact, it worked perfectly within a couple of weeks of actually getting the platform up and running. So there's trade-offs. And so the nice advantage of this is, actually, it gave our existing customers a better experience as well. So our existing customers got a better product than the product they bought, and it meant that the new one did absolutely what we wanted it to do at the point that we launched it. So, testability and observability. So why should I care about this? So testability to me is it's knowing that the change that you've made is working as expected. Observability is knowing that when I put that change actually out into production, get it in front of our customers, it's actually working as I wanted it to work. So investing in testability means that you're investing in the ability to be able to change. Investing in observability means you're investing in making sure that your product's doing what you think it's supposed to be doing. So if you're doing this, how do you get at the data? So, I mean, there's a wealth of different ways that we do this. So one of the things that we will do, almost all products will be logging some information out in some form or another. So one of the things that we do actually across all of our both back-end cloud services and even actually in our products now is actually getting those logs into a log analysis tool. So actually getting the logs into something like Elasticsearch, into Splunk, something like that, so that you can actually visualize how your product is behaving. And you can put some visualizations there. You can start to graph and understand. Okay, yeah, well, actually this thing's working how I thought it was supposed to be working. But what we quite often find though is that using logs to give you an idea about exactly how your product's performing is great, but actually logs can change. And logs can change very frequently. So very quickly you get to the point where actually I was really relying on having that visibility of how this particular part of our product was working, and now the logging's changed and all of a sudden none of that's working anymore. So what we tend to do is we use logging to understand, is this a useful thing to actually be able to measure in production? If it is, then we invest a little bit of time in actually saying, well, actually, let's generate a metric from our application and let's push that into a system, into if you're in like Amazon, for example, into CloudWatch, maybe into Prometheus, Grafana, whatever. Just pushing it into a time series database that you can then have a look at information on and just understand how is this actually performing. So that's what we do. So maybe for some things we may go straight there because we know we absolutely want to be able to measure this particular thing in production. So let's push some metrics up there. Some things we're not sure if it's going to be useful, so let's try it. If it's useful, great, let's make a metric for it. If not, actually we won't worry about it. And then some of the things, so as you start to get lots and lots of metrics and you're sort of understanding how all the different parts of your system are working, what you'll then find is you actually want to understand, well, actually, how does this metric impact this one? And you actually want to start understanding relationships between different parts of your system. And at that point, what we tend to do then is actually push some different metrics into a relational database, so we can actually start understanding actually how is this thing impacting this other thing over there. So in terms of using the data, things like Google Analytics as well. Just anything really that allows you to understand how is my product actually working. So in terms of how that's sort of embedded with how we work, so we now have literally hundreds of dashboards that tell us actually how our product's working, and the dashboards are built by our development teams in cooperation with our product owners. We're literally sitting down together and talking about, well, what should we care about for the particular part of the product we're responsible for? What should we care about? How are we going to know how it's performing? And we're having those discussions at the point that we're building it, so that we understand, well, it's probably worth putting in a metric for this, so that we'll be able to understand how it's working when we put it out there. And that actually, this is working really nicely. And we've got metrics that we'll get from simulations. Actually, we're moving to a place now where we're running the robot in a fully simulated home, a 3D simulated home. We're able to run the robot around. We're getting loads and loads of metrics that tells us how that's working. But actually, the metrics that we're getting from that are the same metrics that we need in production. So actually, we're getting to a place now. We're saying, well, actually, if we build this in such a way that the metrics that we're getting when we're running the simulations are the same metrics that we're getting in production, the same metrics that we get when we home trial, actually very quickly we build up a really good idea about actually how our product's working in all the different phases of development. But our product owners are embedded within they're having these conversations because they care as much about how the product's working as the development teams care about how it's working. So next one, team topologies. So if your teams are going to be working really effectively, your teams are thinking about, well, what are our responsibilities? What's the responsibility of our team? They're thinking about what are the interfaces between our team and another team? And they're also thinking about, actually, how is this going to evolve? Now, it's no surprise, actually, that these things are exactly the same things that you're caring about with architecture. And we found that we need to care as much about our team responsibilities and how our teams interact with other teams as we care about architecture. And in fact, to be honest, if we get our team design right, actually that drives the architecture that we want anyway. What that's enabled us to do by thinking about actually responsibilities of teams, what the interfaces between teams, we've now got to a place where we've got, for development, working specifically on robotics, we've got 4 development centres around the world in 2 different time zones, and all of this is just a fraction of the whole engineering team. So we've got loads of mechanical engineers, lots of hardware electronics engineers who are also working on this product. But this is just some of the software engineers working on our products. So we've got now 20 teams across 4 countries and 2 time zones, all working on software that was going into one product. And by thinking very carefully about, well, what are the responsibilities of the team? How are they interfacing to teams, particularly when the teams are split between time zones? How are we going to manage this so that teams that need to be collaborating a lot together, having lots of conversations, they need to ideally be located in the same time zone? And thinking very carefully about how we then manage that, but also then how we share knowledge as well, because we don't want just all the knowledge of one particular area in one time zone. Again, then we can't make progress. But by thinking about these things and thinking about how this drives our architecture, has definitely allowed us to be a lot more effective. So, to wrap up, so to develop a product, you need to know that your product is fit for purpose. You need to know it's fit now. So not only is it meeting my customers' needs, but actually is my technical debt under control? Because I know my customer needs are going to change. So am I confident that we'll be able to react? So it's not only understanding, is it meeting the customer needs, but actually, is it healthy? Have I changed the oil? Is my system going to be able to react to the different things which I need of it? By investing in testability and observability, it's giving you, again, confidence that I can make changes to it safely and quickly, and that I understand how it's working. I understand actually how it's working in homes. But then next, is it fit to evolve? So are we having good conversations about actually what are the responsibilities of the different parts of our system? How are they interfacing? How are they going to evolve based on the changing needs of our customers? Is it right to rebuild this thing or refactor it? And actually having conversations about the trade-offs. So if we rebuild it, it will actually give us lots more flexibility, but actually it's going to take longer. Is that the right thing to do? Do we do a bit of both? Actually having those conversations. Investing in the ability to be able to continuously get changes out. So, I mean, this is certainly not easy, particularly if you're working on physical products. So we've moved to a model. We were making a release, I don't know, maybe every 3 months, perhaps. We were making a release every 3 months. And we were finding whenever we made that release, we had loads and loads and loads of problems. We've now moved to a model where we release internally to our internal trialists every single week. So every single week we're making changes and we're pushing that out and getting feedback. And it wasn't easy. So having the conversations about, well, what do we need to do to be able to release it every week? They were like, well, actually, things are just going to break if we just start releasing it every week. So having lots of conversations, well, what do we need to put in place to have confidence that we can release it every week? And then lastly, thinking about actually the team responsibilities. In order for us to be able to react, in order for us to be able to evolve the product, we need to think about how our teams are able to evolve as well, and what responsibilities they've got, how they're interfacing to other teams. So if you'd like to know any more about this, these are just 3 absolutely wonderful books on this subject. I can't say I understood all of the software engineering one, but there was definitely a fair bit in there that I think gave me an appreciation, I think. So we could actually have some sensible conversations about the trade-offs we're making. And certainly if you really want to know and sort of understand how should we be organising our teams, what the implications of organising our teams in different ways, then Team Topologies book is absolutely wonderful. The Accelerate book in the middle gives you a good understanding of what the business benefits can be of investing in some of the things that I've been talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thank you for that, Andrew. Really appreciate it. And so any questions from the audience? Yes.
Apologies, this may be a really noddy question, because where you might have said I might have missed it, but why, what was the motivation for Dyson going from a circular to a D-shaped vacuum?
Yes,
so I don't think you said, and it's been bugging me, so I'm intrigued.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. That's a good question. Well, certainly we're like, oh, do you really want to make it D-shaped? Because it's going to be a lot harder to make a robot D-shaped. The reason we did it was because we wanted to get right up into corners. So we wanted to have the ability to get right up into like kickboards underneath in kitchens and stuff like that. it was hard to do it. It was really hard to get it to a place where we could reliably be able to get right up to things, but then also not get stuck. That's why we did it.
Oh, great. Oh, go up here, get my exercise going. I'll come back down.
So my question is, how were you guys able to successfully achieve sharing of information between engineering and product? So for example, you mentioned that it was really good for product to be aware of observability, and that might be via metrics. So with us, a lot of our observability is within the database itself and some metrics, of course, but we found that product struggle to understand this data or to understand where to get the data from. If we had CloudWatch, for example, they're not familiar with navigating through AWS and querying these metrics. So how have you guys been able to achieve that successfully?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's a really good question. So I guess the way that we've approached it is almost, it actually comes back to team responsibility. So we focused it on trying to make it as clear as possible. What was it that the team owned? And it was a whole team. It was like, and the team includes the product owner. So as a whole team, we're responsible for this thing. We're responsible for understanding how it works. How are we going to know that? How are we going to know how it works? And so sometimes it will be the product owner sat down with a developer talking about, well, how can we build a visualization that allows us to understand this thing? I mean, we've got to a point now where, as we've started to push more stuff into a relational database, we're using tools like Tableau. So actually all of our product owners now actually are building Tableau dashboards themselves to allow them to understand how the product is working. But that's evolved over time. And we sort of built up on that. So initially it was actually... And the big change, I think, was it was a team responsibility. Unless the whole team cares about how the thing's working, it's not going to work. But if the whole team cares, then actually everybody works together to figure out, well, how can we get that visualization that gives us the information we need? Does that answer the question?
Cool.
Sorry, Paul.
There's a lady down here.
Yeah, beforehand.
Oh, yeah, you had your hand up?
I have an additional question for Boris.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so obviously not all devs, but some devs see everything as tech debt, or at least anything that anybody else has ever done. Any tips for determining what is actual tech debt and what is just someone tie kicking and thinking that someone else has done it shoddily?
So I guess the way that we try and approach that question is, well, what's really slowing us down? So based on the changes that we know we want to make, what is it that's particularly painful in being able to make those changes? And talking about, I guess so. One of the things that we've started to do, I guess, is when we're talking about investing in. So maybe if let's say we're addressing some technical debt as part of delivering a new capability of a product. That's great, but maybe let's say we actually want to invest in addressing some technical debt outright. We're just going to invest in spending a bit of time to actually make this thing better. Is looking at actually acceptance criteria of, well, what will better look like? So when we've made this change, what's going to be better than it is now? And actually measuring to see if it is at the end. And using that as feedback to say, well, was it worthwhile investing in this thing? Is it now better to do this thing than it was before, based on the metrics that we agreed before we started?
Okay. We'll have one more question.
First of all, thank you for your wonderful talk. I have an additional question, and also it covers a little bit the last one. But so you made 2 round ones, and then I'm just try to figure out why Dyson has chosen to. I mean, there were always corners in the houses, right? We never lived in round houses. Yeah. So. So what was the main change that came up that Dyson, probably as a company and not just your team, was saying like, okay, let's go for this change and for this change in the programs and for the change in the hardware. So, okay.
I mean, I guess it probably came from, I mean, ideally, when we built the first round robot, we knew we were making a compromise. We knew that actually it wasn't going to be able to get right up to corners. But we also knew that actually we had so much learning to do that we knew we wouldn't be able to build a product that would reliably be able to navigate around and not get stuck unless it was round. And so that's where we started. We're like, well, there's a lot of things that we need to know about actually making something that's going to autonomously navigate around effectively an infinite number of different environments. So let's try and make that problem as easy as we can. And then as we learnt about that, it gave us confidence that, well, actually, probably there are things that we can do now. So, for example, when we started working on the one that was D-shaped, and because a fair bit of our system had built in within it the idea of it being round, we said, well, actually, to start with, let's just let the robot think it's still round, but that a larger round area, if that makes sense. So at that point, we were able to just get the whole thing was working. The robot was able to autonomously navigate entirely around the home, not get stuck, because it thought it was actually bigger than in reality it was. And then bit by bit, we were able to say, okay, well, as we've addressed some of the technical debt that we needed to, so that actually different parts of the system now could understand that the robot wasn't completely round, we were able to basically turn those features on bit by bit.
Because I just find it interesting, because I think you were some of the pioneers and everybody just copied your round shape, right? Without asking for corners. So thank you so much.
Great. Again, thank you so much for that, Andy. I think it's time for our lunch break. Another round of applause, please.